Okay, so I have no fancy PowerPoint, so I just bring my paper. So my presentation is Dissident Friendship in the Age of Neoliberal Division, co-producing community-based insurgent knowledge with migrant women activists in Shenzhen, China. In this paper, I critically address a series of epistemological and methodological concerns flashed out during my ongoing community-based participatory research, or CBPR, with a group of rural migrant women activists in Shenzhen, China. By contextualizing my transnational feminist positionality and my CBPR praxis in the present and historical conjuncture of China's authoritarian resurgence and the post-Cold War neoliberal globalization, I attempt to render visible the anti-relational logic of neoliberal patriarchal governance in the process of feminist insurgent knowledge co-production. During the recent decades, China has experienced neoliberal precarization on both socioeconomic and political fronts, coupled with the industrial transition from the export-oriented manufacturing economy to the service-led finance-fueled economy. The state's withdrawal from the public welfare perpetuates the rural migrant class division and drives migrant community dispossession to a grand scale. Rural migrant women who live at the intersection of labor precarity and unpaid care burden disproportionately bear the brunt of structural transition. Politically, in face of the multiple post-Cold War geopolitical contingency, the party state authorities relies upon a unified citizenry defined as politically obedient subjects. President Xi's administration has reinvented its authoritarian approach to social management, crushing the semi-autonomous grassroots society forged under the previous Hu Wen government. The current mode of governance, called neoliberal socialization, as a government contracting out social services to grassroots society, transfer the cost and risk of welfare provision to the grassroots society while putting the minoritized community under supervision. So grassroots organizations that work on the front line of community building are burdened with governmental demands, shortage of social workers and funding, immediate crisis, and other political economic contingencies. So with the state ban on international nonprofit donation and the mechanism of selective funding, many oppositional grassroots faced registration obstacles and found it almost impossible to institutionalize themselves into the nonprofit sector. So the constellation of economic political crisis precipitates new waves of popular insurgencies, forcing activist groups to be financially self-reliant and politically de-radicalized. So the formation of contemporary feminists, Chinese feminism, is embedded in this particular political economic ecology, under which the matrix power of state, capitalism, and patriarchy enables multiple forms of contradiction and differentiation within the feminist constituents. So because of the deterritorializing political climate, the previous urban NGO feminists moved their political organizing to social media. However, this mode of digital feminism continues to deepen class differentiation by relying on social media to increase the visibility of their political agenda and build movement platforms. Whereas rural migrant women, most of whom lack access and time for social media, engage in offline community services and mobilization, and oftentimes their collective actions are not recognized as feminist. So the second contradiction manifests itself through the boundary making between academic feminism and activist feminism. So within the traditional social science and humanities, feminist scholars are pushed into an outsider-within location whose knowledge production, pedagogical practice are subject to the state's censored and male elite-dominated academic enterprise. Not only are feminist scholars disencouraged in to make interdisciplinary intervention into other critical social studies, but also are prohibited from making meaningful community engagement and producing activist scholarship to address interlocking structural issues. So over the decades, feminist scholars have experienced an increasing sense of precariousness as they witness the narrowing academic spaces for feminist scholarship. So within in China, the domestic feminist scholars can only focus on depoliticized women's issues and disconnecting themselves from multiple sides of political struggles, for example, labor activism. So here comes my community-based research with migrant women activists and their grassroots initiative, the Green Rose Social Service Center, hence GR, in Shenzhen, China. Since early 2020, I have been dedicated to building trust with GR women and making consistent support for their community organizing. I was connected to GR women through a mutual friend, Kay, who has been my LGBT activist comrade since 2015. While my initial entry into GR's activist network was an ally, we negotiated to an agreement that to expand my role to an researcher partner. So I have worked remotely as an online volunteer, bring useful resources to support their collective work. In exchange, I am allowed to conduct ethnographic fieldwork at their center physically. However, cultivating critical solidarity with grassroots community back home comes with multiple forms of risk, since it requires feminist companions to walk through divisive and oppressive powerful structures, political structures. The contingencies of border crossing activist research become even more heightened when geopolitical tension between China and the US continue escalating, especially during the global pandemic crisis. So China's long-lasting zero policy regulation and crackdowns on civilian resistance bring a disruptive impact on the everyday life and activism of grassroots community. In my case, due to the ongoing COVID outbreaks, regional lockdowns, and travel restriction, I have to delay my field trip over time and shift most of my fieldwork to online space, where our community engagement is rendered hyper-visible to the state digital surveillance and security data mining. So here is a very dramatic experience. A few months ago, I attended a Zoom meeting hosted by Chinese Feminist Forum, which is the biggest transnational feminist, Chinese transnational feminist networking. So they invited a Taiwanese labor activist who work on female immigrant workers' unionization in Taiwan. So during the Q&A session, when I had a conversation with the speaker about migrant workers' community activism in mainland, my community partners, the GR Women's background information was shared on the public chat. 2 days later, I received a phone call from my friend Kay, the interlocutor Kay, who informed me that the local department of China's State Security Agency in Shenzhen attempted to profile me by questioning my community partners about my background information. So 3 weeks later, GR Women's monthly donation program was forcibly removed from the public fundraising platform due to the pressure from the above or whatever reasons. So in face of this contingency, GR women carry out their persistent spirit of sisterhood solidarity and worked with their intro and a transnational activist network to enact practical solutions. So as experienced grassroots organizers with years of navigating institutional barriers, the GR's co-founder, Dee, and her migrant sisters are the first responders to the crisis. They use social media to perform institutional legitimacy by posting their NGO's registration certificate to the WeChat official account. In doing so, they reappropriate the dominant grammar of state authority and leverage their negotiation power with the local government. So, meanwhile, they also make emergency call for fundraising, both online and offline. So this collective effort of community members and their activists come together to solve this political economic contingencies really speaks to how migrant women place the insurgent co-conspiracy to the frontier to the front line of community organizing, and in doing so, they reclaim the sphere of community reproduction as revolutionary and transform the seemingly depoliticized service activism into frontier for radical assemblies and political convergences. So witnessing my personal struggle and GR Women's collective action intertwined and unfolding, I realized that transnational feminist scholars and community partners are differentially tethered to the contemporary political landscape in terms of visibility. In other words, we are differentially rendered vulnerable to state surveillance, and at the same time, our mutually embodied vulnerabilities and shared struggles forge a critical conjunctions as a new and densely interconnected political geography. So this I borrow from Ruth Wilson-Gilmore. Thus, it is a feminist mandate to unravel the historical contingencies of dissident politics and solidarity building that are constantly reconfigured locally and transnationally. Recognizing differential relationality in this non-linear process of collective subject making is central to recognizing and reconceptualizing the power dynamics and changing modalities of feminist insurgent knowledge co-production. Here I ask myself, how can I actively work against increasingly normalized state surveillance and self-censorship in the process of knowledge co-production? How can I tactfully carry on community-based research process without putting my community partner in a precarious status? So first of all, the dynamics our on the one hand, the mindful practice of self-censorship is an ethical necessity to minimize the harmful impacts of state surveillance. Self-censorship is both a means of self-preservation and reserved care for community partners. However, on the other hand, we need to be cautious about self-censorship being increasingly normalized in our everyday life. And I suggest transnational feminist scholars have to work our own fear of state surveillance and critically interrogate self-imposed censorship in complicities with state authoritarian power. So the second, transnational feminist research must be grounded in place-based insurgent knowledge production outside of the state academic censorship industry. So the third is if insurgent, as GR community demonstrate, dissident friendship can be practically enacted on the community ground to negate the anti-relational logic. So that means I have to be physically there, be presenting their everyday life and participate in their everyday community organizing to take account how they doing these things. So this is my methodological choices, consist of ethnographic fieldwork and archival research and especially right now after China's end of zero policy, the insurgent walking with communities is a necessity, I think. Yeah, and that's all. Thank you so much.